I wanted to play off of the fact that he was talking about younger bodybuilders, right? I mean, professional bodybuilders go from growing like crazy, training hard as hell, to doing stuff for Instagram, and they stop progressing. And I'm names, but these are people that had like Mr. Olympia level genetics on track to doing it, and they're
It's pretty good. I've been kind of just busy working. I'm actually doing this Panera bread while I'm kind of eating because I have a client I have to train at like 4 o'clock. So instead of me driving back home and then coming back to where I currently am, I'm just gonna still here, focus on my clients, do their updates and stuff, and then train them and then go home and relax.
Mhm.
I'm good. Did some cardio. Went to the gym. Chilled a little bit.
We
Some
baited
client
Charles into
programming.
doing cardio daily, by the way, you guys. He wasn't
Yeah.
not doing it daily, and now he is.
Like just join the cardio gang.
Who are the other people on my panel? All right, so we can start with our introduction point. So, our podcast name is, what is it again? It's
My
Mind, body, mind
bodybuilder
bodybuilders,
soul.
soul. Yeah.
there we go, My Bodybuilder and Soul. So the people on the panel, so we can start off. Paul is our podcast man. He'll kick it off and start with the intro, bro. Let's do this thing. We're doing
All right, let's do this. All right, guys. So welcome to our little podcast that we like to have a good time with. This time there's no jet lag where I'm just like, all right, guys. I'm just kidding. It was from the last video. But yeah, so we're doing this podcast basically to inform, give people a lot of information about like training, lifting, anything that's generally related to like life situations. And we're gonna be talking about like certain stuff, and we're also gonna have our experiences, and then each one of us are gonna go around and kind of explain your experience based on what we've had, and then that way we can kind of go off and piggyback off each other, going through it like that. So the first topic that we have today is gonna be focused entirely on progressive overload,
Progressive
which is a
overload.
very well talked topic because there's so many different ways to like approach progressive overload. But as you find out with lifting, it's not one size fits all. What are your thoughts? How do you guys usually progress?
Okay, introduce himself.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Charles. I do powerlifting. Nothing new. Nothing crazy. If you've seen any of the podcasts before, uh, super long introduction. For me, like when I do progressive overloading, I might idea of like step periodization where you and I had the conversation of all, like let's say right now I'm doing SSB squats, and then the next week it'll be straight. I'll work up to a top triple, and then next week a top triple on straight bar, and underneath an SSB I try to go for a heavier weight on my top triple and then work down sets to get my volume in. So that's kind of how I attack progressive overload. Just considering I'm mixing bodybuilding and powerlifting right now, like I'm still trying to make sure my big three movements progressing while I'm focusing on bodybuilding for the next few months. So that's how I attack it. I keep a lot of my progressive overload on big, and for me, like smaller lifts, I don't know, like arms and triceps, you can overload. But I'm also the type of person, like a lot of your secondary muscle group, depending on how much effort you put in, like your core lifts, like your big lifts, it's that progression because you could do squats one week and then you try to do leg extensions, you're more fried because you put in more effort on your squat, so you're not going to match uh the same progression on your leg extensions, anything like that with the smaller secondary movements.
So I'm David Demesquita. Anyone that's tuning in pretty much knows me by this point. Obviously, national level bodybuilder. And when it comes to progressive overload, and that's before, you guys pretty much know who I am also. Um, Now, I think we're doing this one in phases. We're going to cover the progressive overload piece, and then we're going to cover some PEDs later on. We run out of here and then crop that and put another video out, right? Something like that. So either way, when it comes to progressive overload, I'm a little bit unique in the sense that, like, when it comes to my versus my athletes. Now, I'm not hypocritical in this sense. It's just I can manipulate goals much easier because everyone's day is going to be different. So when I do progressive, I do like top sets. It's very, very hard to manipulate top sets in people have good and bad days, and top sets are always going to change. So if this I'm not feeling good, for instance, right? Like my joints are aching and I can't warm up and to make anything feel. What I'll do is I will hit a top set for like a 1 rep or 2 rep just to get the stress load on the nervous system, the central nervous system ready for the next movement. Powerlifting mindset, right? Like 100%. The body, the central nervous system ready, and then I'll try to hit a top set right after that. And the top set's just not a good top set after 1 rep. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to blow up my load on this and try to get injured or anything like that. I'll back maybe 10 pounds or something like that on each side just to make sure it's more comfortable. My body's already used to moving them. It's going to be easier. And I'll do like 2 to 3 sets at that weight to attribute volume and stress load that I most likely get with those extra. So when I'm working with athletes, try to do is I actually try to create hypertrophy in a very, very simple method, which is reps times sets equals volume. Why? Because that is the easiest way to track. There are not better ways to track progressive overload. There's a million ways to track progressive overload. There's a million different principles. Time under tension. There's intensity. What I would expect out of an athlete, what I would expect out of myself is intense that I can and intentional that I can. And it also has to mainly do with internal stimulus. Getting better contractions and better range of motion and better mind to muscle connection, which every single day, that is ultimately where you're going to progress as far as muscular development goes. But her intervention will be caused through that. So you can do less weight, actual internal hypertrophy when you're doing that. So that is ultimately I like to train. I like to focus on the basically more of the internal piece. I am getting that mind to muscle connection going to get more out of less. But on my major compound movements, like Charles was saying, I am a power lifter and not ego lifter, but a power. I like to progress on at least 2 major movements every single day. I have major compound movements that I'm doing, and I like to make sure that I'm progressing with those 2. So with athletes, 2 major compound movements, sets, reps, weight. And that's how I track it with my athletes, with myself, very, very similar. But I usually will do like a 2 working load set, 2 top. And that's kind of where I try to sit. And it's only because I am more injury prone when I am doing those 2. I usually like with athletes, 3 sets.
Awesome. So that's how these guys apply progressive overload. Mine is a little bit different, just to show you there's like different diversity on how to apply progression. So for example, I usually do a total of maybe 2 to 3 sets. So if I have 2 sets in my working sets, I would do 2 sets, but then take them all the way up to like a certain specific rep number, which would be like, let's say 10, for example, if I were to select 10. If I hit 10 on those 2 straight sets, next week, I'll bump up the weight to make either by 5 or 10 pounds, and then lower the reps and start really low from 4, and then work my way all the way back up to 10. So this way, every single week, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm always constantly progressing, whether it just be by numbers, whether it just be by increasing the intensity, whether it just be by adding load. So I'm never, ever, ever stalling when I lift. And I know it sounds weird to explain this to people because they can't really comprehend something so simple, but literally there's never been a time where like I stall on a specific number or on a specific load. If I do, I just kind of find a way to add more volume, whether I take 10 to 15 seconds, 20 seconds, or whatever breaks in between, and then go back again and hit that exact same weight for that 1 extra rep or 2 extra rep as I go. So this week I'm always constantly progressing. So with that said, there's really no right or wrong answer to progressive overload. At the end of the day, volume is overall king in a sense, but if you do volume without intensity, you're not really going to get much out of it if you're doing like really low weight and then you're doing like 15 to 30 reps and there's not much effort. So volume is king, but right next to volume, you also have to consider about how intense the workout. In terms of intensity, how much of an intensive set are you doing per sets versus just going in there and not doing any sort of intention towards your lift. So to piggyback, to kind of summarize everything, I progressive overload by having 2 to 3 sets. I have 2 main sets where I aim for a specific rep range, which is usually 10 reps. Once I hit those 10 reps, I increase the weight and then start low again and then work my way all the way up to 10 reps again with the new weight and continuously repeated that. If I want to add more sets, what I would do is I would still do the 2 sets or whatever, and then do like a rest pause, do drop sets, do whatever I can to add more overall volume to be able to drive progression by increasing the overall workload within that given session. So that's how I apply progressive overload.
I just want to add to that. So the most simple way to do progressive overload is just said, and that's actually what I have my athlete. And you shoot for 10. I like the 12 rep range because what that happens is usually once you stair step up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
be around 10 reps or you're going to be right below it. But once you start getting below 8 reps, you're talking about for most people, because they break down their form by the time they're hitting that actual failure point.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hitting 8 reps, that's cool. Once you go below 8 reps, that's not cool. Once you get above, like I do like that 8 to 12 rep range, because when you go to step up, you to like the 9 to 10 rep range. Again, so the way that Paul is doing it is recommend it to pretty much anyone. It's what I've done over the years, and it's what I today. I like 8 to 12 reps on most things. Now, there are other rep ranges and stuff like that, which we can jump into later. But for the progression, I like the way that.
Awesome. It goes back to the idea of like old school Arnold with when they would like, 12, 10, 8, 6.
Yep.
You literally just pick something you do for 12, something you can do for 10, 8, and then something you can do for 6. And that keeps it at that. Like I know for me, like when I program for clients, the one variable like I can control is like how volume and load that they work with, but I can never control their intensity. So like when I'm programming for an athlete, like I know I can give, like if they're doing this, okay, it's not that difficult. I don't know how much intensity, how in, like I can't control that. A lot of people, on average, most people don't train it. It's just what it is. A lot of people do not train intense. They will never train intense. The fear of failure, so on and so forth. So the one variable, volume. Add another set. Add more reps. Because that's a variable it's easily controlled. You can't control intensity based off the gym one day and you're feeling like crap.
Mm.
Yep.
Are you gonna go as intense? No, but you can reduce the weight and still get your volume.
I mean, another thing is like if you're tired that day. So I was talking internal connections. If you're just tired that day, your mind to muscle connection is very, very hard to create a good mind to muscle connection, getting good contractions, stretches, whatever, making the movement feeling good. And it will take you 30 minutes to get warmed up to be able to create that mind to muscle connection, to detach your mind from that rest. And it's a talent to be able to segment your life to the point where you do get better mind to muscle connections in life. So yeah, agree with that completely. It's kind of has to do with the good and bad days thing. You can't tell that, and a lot of people do not train intense. A lot of people do stuff the gram and stuff like that now.
Yeah.
So what do you guys consider training intense? Talking about you guys specifically, Dave and Charles.
You're breaking up a little bit. What are you saying?
Yeah. What do we what?
So what do you guys consider training intense?
You go first, Dave.
All right, cool. So training intense. And I hate to say it like this because coming from like old school and stuff like that, you don't make noise in the gym. You internalize that pain. You go. Now, the thing is with me, when I'm going hard as hell, like when I am pushed, I will like literally let out a scream, like a roaring by the time I'm like 1 or 2 reps more. And I literally am gassed at the top of the movement. And I'm telling myself, look, you got 1 more rep in you because I know you have 2 to 3 more reps in you. At least 1 more, and you play it safe and you don't get that 1 extra rep, right? Because I know I'm going to technical failure. If you can push yourself to right before a technical failure, you have mastered. You have literally master training. So training intense is right before you're hitting the technical. And it takes you have to master training to get to the point where you know your true failure is. And that's why like I don't like the whole reps in reserve thing, or I like intensity factors because you don't know until you've actually like like, hey, I'm not going to do your program because I don't know how hard I can train yet. And you find out how you train, how hard your mind will let you go before your body fails. And I've torn my muscle where I know my limitations by this point, and you've got to get injured over time. And it sounds really because you really don't want to get injured. Like the more you get injured, the more of a setback it is. But you also do learn to contract the muscle groups better. You learn better form, and you also learn how to get closer and closer without injuring yourself.
That's pretty much is that for me it's down, and it's that idea of the limitations that you put upon yourself, and in your mind, like if you literally think you can't get any more, you're gonna break down. That's just it. Like if you get in that mindset where you can get more, get a few out of it, and you know how to squeeze and just really like to that breaking point, that last 10% that's left. Because a lot of people, I would say, who will train, a lot of people are going to cut out around 80%. 80% of true exhaustion. You're going to have your form breakdown, and mechanical breakdown. And I'm starting to see it in a lot of these younger kids, man, especially I'm watching these kids like these big lift, and they're just straight pushing it. They're pushing that like, okay, you should have stopped a long time ago because you're about to get injured, and they just pushing it, and it's very impressive. So in the powerlifting community, you're seeing a lot more of these kids pushing limitation, and that's it's very cool to see. But I think they're bodybuilders, so much for the looking pretty and for the gram, training is shit. They're trash. You have a lot of influencers who are trying to reinvent the wheel, and it's like, no, your execution on traditional movements and you say, oh, I got injured doing that because you didn't know what the fuck you're doing in the first place. Take some tips from a powerlifter. Oh, I got to make sure I put this into this angle to maximize this tension. Like, no, dude, you stay in the line of pulling how your body functions. That's your problem. So, and it's like, oh, I this is something cool to social media. Everyone's doing it. Oh, praise me. And it's like, no, people 20, 30 years ago, dude, just sit back. You have Instagram now. So yeah, you don't see a lot of people training intense, man. And for me, it's you can explain it. You can try to explain, but it's something you literally just have to see. Like, it's like he said, he can tell you what he's talking about. See him doing that, you're not gonna know it. Like if you've watched me at a powerlifting meet, like when I approached 755 last year and for reps at 180, I just walked up to the bar. I was chill, walked up to the bar, and I'm not one of those people that just gets loud. I got to just super focus, went down, and like you didn't see until I started coming back up. Like it was just, I was in the zone, and when I come back up, I go, okay, now it's time to push. Then it was which turned on, and it's like, let's go. I'm very chill. Like, I mean, y'all seen the video in booty shorts or whatever, joking, like, moving heavy weights, joking around, like 600 pounds for 6 reps on shorts. I don't need to. I save that intensity for when it's necessary. You don't need to be in that level of intensity always, because that's where you're increasing the risk of injury. That there's the risk versus reward factor, and you have to understand. For longevity, do you want to play in that realm too often?
Yeah, I think you're also touching on the point of central nervous system fatigue, but that's a whole another topic for conversation. I wanted to play off of the fact that he was talking about younger bodybuilders, right? I mean, professional bodybuilders go from growing like crazy, training hard as hell, to doing stuff for Instagram, and they stop progressing. And but these are people that had like Mr. Olympia level genetics on track to doing it, and they're in their prime right now, and they have started doing stuff for like that because they're making so much money doing all this stuff, and they have actually stopped progressing. I'm not going to name names, but there's like a few people I can think of in particular that have stopped, and these are like some of the best genetics in the world. I'm like, dude, like, come on, just go hard.
I think I know one that you're thinking about, because I shared him in the group chat just the other day.
Oh no! I don't even know who that guy is.
Okay.
Well,
he had a lot of potential. a lot of potential, man. Like really great physique, freak genetics, and it's the Graham got a hold of him.
Yeah. All right, Paul. So why don't you throw in on this?
So for me, intensity is a little bit weird to explain. It's about the same as you guys, but like I've always trained intense when I go to the gym, and it's because of that I've progressed as much as I have, because that's the only way I know how to like train. It's like I work hard. It's the idea of like, if you want to get to a certain point in your life, you're going to add certain stressors. And if you're someone who goes to the gym and you're not adding that stress to be able to have your body adapt to where you can handle the next stress, you're not going to be able to grow. And just in real life, if you're having all these stress problems, whether it's just be real world, whether something's hitting you, or whether relationships and stuff like that, and you never once adapt to like be better than that stressor, what are you going to do? You're always just going to stay the same, or you're just going to stagnate, or just like be less of what you are. But if you practice every time to be better than that and push yourself and go beyond that stress or beyond that stress, you will get better every time. That like when you get a certain stress level that comes to you the next time, you're going to be able to handle it better. So that's kind of how I look at weightlifting, and particularly training intensity, because like for me, I realized, okay, if I go to the gym, yeah, I still do the 1 to 3 reps in reserves, because there's a place and a time for things like that. They're all just tools, and it's how you use them. So for me personally, I do not have a rep range. I stopped doing rep ranges. Like I'm not gonna be like, I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna do like 6 to 8 reps, 8 to 10 reps. I don't do that. Like I pick a weight that is very heavy, that is very challenging, that I know I'm going to be able to fill at a certain rep ranges that's just moderate enough to stimulate hypertrophy. It may be 10, it may be 11, it may be 15, it may be 20. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I know that I'm going to push myself and at least try to add in that reps in reserve, because sometimes training to failure all the time is really not necessary. But if you can get yourself just a little bit closer to failure without going over failure, there's benefits in that. But you don't do that by saying, all right, I'm going to get on this weight. I'm going to do 6 to 8 reps. And then when you're done, it's just like, I got 6 to 8 reps. What if you had 5 more? What if you had 10 more reps in there and you never really pursued it? So that's why when I train my clients and when I train myself personally, I just tell them, hey, man, here's the target that you hit. But if you can do more than that, do more than that. Training intensely has always been something that I love to do, because I love the pain. I love to suffer when I go to the gym. I love to train that way, because I know that if I'm doing this right, I have a reason to do it. And there's that intention of going in there. Intention, intent, intensity, all those things come together. And this is how you create a very well top caliber physique. Granted, if you rest up and recover and stuff like that, because there does come a certain point where you're training intense all the time and it ends up becoming a detrimental factor. So you have to be able to level yourself, but not get too extreme. But at the same time, get yourself just enough to the extreme to where you're not hurting yourself. But training intensely is very important. And like these guys said, a lot of people don't do it, and they don't know how to. That's the thing. Like people just don't know how to push themselves. And sometimes when they push themselves to a certain point, they're like, "Oh, this is too uncomfortable, so I'm going to stop." I'm like, dude, fucking go, do more reps. you know?
So I'm going to play off of that because we did get a question in chat that kind of relayed exactly what you asked. And the question, by the way, for those of you that don't know that are watching the podcast, we're streaming these on Twitch TV now, and he'll put the link below. But he was asking about, have we talked about plateaus yet? And that's a really good question. I think we all have our own methodologies of preventing plateaus or getting past plateaus and the approaches that we take. So I think we should punt this one off to maybe Paul first, since he just kind of hit on the subject a very little bit, and then we'll go to Charles and then myself.
So I think I said this a while back into the video. I rarely ever have a moment where I'm like plateauing, and I don't ever do deloads like most people do deloads. Like I literally do not do deloads. For me, it's just train really heavy, train really hard, get to the point where it's time for prep. Or if I feel like I'm getting too tired and too fatigued, I don't know, there's just concepts like listening to your body. If you know you're going to the gym and you're like tired and sore and you can't perform very well, just take a day off. Like it's not like the end of the world. You can come back stronger and better. But in terms of plateau, I apply my progression scheme. I train very hard, very intensely, but at the same time, I know when like, okay, I'm not feeling good. If I'm not feeling good, I'm just not going to go to the gym or train. I'm not going to push myself, and I know I'm not going to perform well because at the end of the day, for me, it's all about performance. If I don't perform those quality workouts, like why am I here? You know? So I always go in there with the intent to train and beat the logbook, either by a rep, by adding weights, by adding more intensity routine, or I just take a little bit of a longer rest when I'm working out. Like if I do a heavy set, I'm not going to go back again in like a minute and be like, all right, I just bench 405 for whatever. Let me just take a minute break and then hit 405 again. Like, no, that's how you get injured. So definitely, it's hard for me to relate because I don't think I've ever been in a position where I've plateaued, if that makes sense. And I tell people this all the time, but they don't believe me. Because if you're applying like these sets, these reps, these weights, and you're doing this over a course of a week and you're eating and you're resting and you're recovering and you know how to properly progress, you'll never plateau. I mean, you're going to make gains, but they're just going to be these little slow gains gradually over time that you're always, always, always going to make consistent progress. Who else wants to dive in on this?
I want to hear Charles because Charles is coming from powerlifting, so
And there
he's
are
about to start.
plateaus.
He's going to talk about deloading, and
Which is
then
good.
that I'm kind of in between bodybuilding and powerlifting. Like I have a lot of powerlifting principles applied into my lifting, so I'm curious to hear your side of it before I go.
So it is funny, especially after this last weekend of meeting Ed Cohn, because someone actually, and it was my mindset before I stepped directly into powerlifting. I was never really a person to take deloads. I kind of would consider it a reload, which is I would just cut back on weight a little bit, maybe a little bit of volume, but I didn't take like a true deload as what most would consider a deload nowadays. And it was just a way of like, motion is lotion for the joints. It keeps the body going. You recover better. I focus more on rest during the process of a deload. But the process of doing like back-to-back meets in a year and a half, like 4 meets, I prepped for 4 meets in a year and a half. Yeah, I did need my deloads between those, especially after powerlifting meet. The body did need a break. It's just, especially in reps. Like if I'm doing like raw competitions with just sleeves, I'm fine. But when I'm doing reps, I'm putting that much extra load on my back for squats. Like I'm gonna want to take a deload because I'm potentially doing 10 to 15% more than I'm able to hit in a 1 rep max in a 1 rep max. Like I'm doing more than what my body's capable of doing. Uh, so like geared lifters and stuff like that, multiply guys, like those guys might need a deload because it's just so much stress on the body. Uh, but like Paul, like if you plan properly, like you don't need a lot of deloads. Like I've deloaded one lift before while I kept progressing throughout squats and bench. Like deadlift needed a deload, so I pulled back on deadlift. Like plateaus don't exist overall. They exist in parts of the body. Like your shoulders might just stop growing at one point. You've reached your potential that you can get within your shoulders. So focus on something else to bring it up. And I think people that look at plateaus are like, oh, I only hit this. I've hit this weight on bench press, and that's all I can do. I'm like, then cut back and do some more volume. Like, you hit a limitation. Like, where did you break down? Like, were you bouncing it off your chest? Like, did it not come off your chest? Did it break? Could you not lock it out? If you couldn't lock it out, then you need to focus on your shoulders and your triceps. It's not so much your bench that's weaker. It's just your lockout's weaker. So, same as like someone in a squat, like if they just can't get out of the hole, well, then they have to fix that. If they're breaking, midway up, if they're hip shifting, there's so many different areas you can look at on like lifting where plateaus are around. And it's not come down to like, mechanical failures a lot, or just how someone's leverages aren't working. Like someone can say, oh, I hit a plateau. Like, okay, are you in a deficit? Yeah, you're in a deficit. Okay. Strength isn't always linear in a caloric deficit. There's just so many different variables. But if everything, I think if everything's down to a T, like if you were 100% on training, nutrition, recovery, I mean, like if you were in a vacuum sealed box and all you had to worry about was training, nutrition, recovery, and nothing else, I don't think plateaus would be wouldn't really exist as much because you would be in a perfect simulation, and that just doesn't exist. So the plateaus that exist now, it's like it's probably, your recovery is shit, or vice versa, or it was a bad day, and that's a variable you can't mess with. So, but I think when people think about plateaus, like that's where they start putting limitations on themselves. Like, oh, I hit a plateau, I can't do this anymore. Like, well, you could, now you've already set yourself up for failure by thinking you can't because you had a bad day. Like strength is never linear. It's not. It just doesn't work that way.
Okay, so I can kind of talk to it. So plateaus do exist. They do, but they don't. Here's the thing: with plateaus, central nervous system fatigue will be the hardest plateau you ever hit. Why? Because you're going to be bedridden
That
for
was the
several
topic.
days. Yeah, you're literally going to be bedridden. There was a point in time when I could not leave my bed, where I was calling Chinese restaurants, getting takeout, and my wife was going to have to go to the door to grab. Well, she was my girlfriend at the time, having to go to the door to grab food to bring it to my bed so he eat bedside because I couldn't lift my body out of bed. She was actually having to help me up. That's true central nervous system fatigue. There were external factors that came into it besides just training hard as hell. I knew when I hit it. Like I was at the gym and I was like, I just think that I hit central nervous system fatigue. I knew before stepping to the gym that day, if I went hard, I was gonna hit it. And I like hit a wall and I couldn't function. Like I couldn't keep my head up. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I like stimulants weren't doing anything. Caffeine wasn't doing anything, like nothing. And so when that happens, that is the only time when I truly believe like you like can't function, you're in bed.
Yeah.
That's one. And it's not really a plateau, it's a central nervous system fatigue. Plateaus
You just hit that ceiling that you had. You hit it, and now you have to break through it, and that's your body breaking through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So then as far as like muscle growth plateaus, I do believe that the muscle growth plateaus has to do with plateaus within the like it's a mechanical disadvantage. You've overloaded the muscles to the point where they can no longer recover because you're hitting and then you're putting wear and tear on the joints, and you do have to back off that overload. I'm overloading my arms for a total of 8 weeks to see how much growth I can get out of it. And the funny thing is, I won't see as much growth when I'm going through this phase, but as soon as I stop overloading it, I'm going to see muscle growth right afterwards. And people are like, oh, training my arms less is growing my arms. No, it has to do with the fact that they're finally recovering from pounding them 4 days a week, 3 days a week, how many days a week. I'm literally hitting them 4 days a week right now. 2 full days of arms and then 2 more days. And I haven't done this in like 3 years probably, but it's one of my weak points. I have long extremities and I have a massive frame. So it is what it is. So that's one thing is overload. I overload the group hard and then I back off because your joints, like I already am aching in my joints. I'm 3 weeks in and I have another 5 weeks to go. And I know I'm going to make it through those 5 weeks. So it's like, do you train till failure as much? You don't go towards true failure because you're stimulating. If you annihilate, you're done. Like I just annihilated my biceps the other day. I'm supposed to train arms tomorrow. Realistically, it's going to be a shit workout. Why? Because I did it to myself. Because I knew like if I went to a failure, then I can't stimulate anymore because the connections, the mind to muscle connection that we talked about earlier is going to be trash. Why? Because they're not fully recovered. And that's one thing that you have to be very careful with taking that volume and spreading it, peanut butter spreading it. That's what I call it through the week. That's like one way to program. Now the other thing is heavy lifting, it creates more central nervous system fatigue. Like he was talking about the glass box thing. When I hit that central nervous system fatigue, I was going from Atlanta to Seattle every single week. So you're talking about the volume in the chambers. You're talking about being on West Coast time and East Coast time. That's why I've never heard of central nervous system fatigue that hard. I have hit it in the past where I've bedridden for like maybe a day. And when I do get to that point, the only way that I do a true deload is it might be 2 to 3 days off, and it has to do with stress deloading. It has to do with the cortisol levels. So it has to do with the nutritional fact of it. And then you flood the body full of nutrients while it's recovering. And why? You flood the body because it lowers your cortisol level so you can actually recover your central nervous system as well as, but it like literally it will slam down the cortisol levels because your cortisol levels got jacked up, your epinephrine, norepinephrine through the roof. That's what basically is adrenaline. So you need to get your adrenal glands like re-energized and you need to push down those cortisol levels. And I'm keeping it super, super dumbed down. So you do that in the downtime. Then you go back in the gym, and motion is important, because your joints will fade on you. It won't be good to move heavy weight immediately coming off a break like that. So you just want to get the nutrients that you have now put in the body circulating through the body, and circulation will also help with nutrient partitioning. So this whole piece of a deload is really just to give the body a break, the mind a rest. It has nothing to do with the muscles unless if you actually truly fail out. And you should never truly fail out unless if you're walking into a power meet and you're going for something that you mentally know you can do more than, and your body literally can't do it. And it's very rare that someone can actually go to that mental capacity level anyways. And like he said, glass box, if we were in a glass box, 100%, I don't think we'd hit plateaus ever, honestly. And I mean, you're talking about the super supplements that are in the industry now, performance enhancing drugs. It makes it very, very difficult. I mean, like literally, if you were having your hormone, like sitting like under an IV bag and getting blood work done at all times and stuff like that, like you'd be a freak of nature.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing over in Dubai, something similar to that with these guys. But it's pretty much as glass door as they can get.
Yeah, you're